สวัสดีครับยินดีต้อนรับนะครับสู่งาน Thailand Craft Chocolate Festival นะครับ TCCF 2021นะครับพบกับผมนะครับแจ็คจาก Yellow Chocolate นะครับวันนี้เราจะมาคุยกันในหัวข้อพิเศษนะครับเป็นหัวข้อที่เจาะลึกลงไปสำหรับเรื่องความยั่งยืนโดยเฉพาะนะครับสำหรับคนที่มองหาความยั่งยืนนะครับหรือว่าสนใจแล้วก็ใส่ใจในเรื่องของทั้งระบบเลยนะครับตั้งแต่ต้นน้ำยันปลายน้ำนะครับแล้วก็อยากให้ทุกอย่างเนี่ยมันคงอยู่ดำรงอยู่ไม่จากหายไปจากโลกนี้นะครับเซกชันนี้คือคำตอบครับเพราะว่าเราจะพูดคุยเจาะลึกกันถึงจะทำอย่างไรนะครับให้ช็อกโกแลตเนี่ยอยู่ยั่งยืนบนโลกนี้นะครับอยู่คู่กับโลกนี้ได้อย่างยาวนานนะครับแต่ว่าเซกชันนี้จะไม่ได้ใช้ภาษาไทยนะครับอาจจะมีการสรุปแปลเป็นบางช่วงนะครับแต่ว่าส่วนใหญ่แล้วเนี่ยจะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษทั้งหมดนะครับเพราะว่าแขกรับเชิญของเราวันนี้2คนเนี่ยเป็นฝรั่งทั้งคู่เลยนะครับแล้วก็น่าสนใจมากๆเลยครับว่าจุดเริ่มต้นของเขาเนี่ยเขาตั้งต้นทำช็อกโกแลตของเขาเนี่ยเพราะเหตุผลบนความยั่งยืนนะครับอีกคนนึงก็เป็นอาจารย์สอนเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการทำเกษตรกรรมเพื่อความยั่งยืนเหมือนกันนะครับของมหาลัยที่อเมริกานะครับเดี๋ยวเรามาดูกันทั้ง2คนเป็น founder ของแบรนด์ช็อกโกแลตในประเทศไทยทั้งนั้นเลยนะครับโอเค let me introduce you to our speaker the founders of the chocolate brand 3D and Siam Maya okay here they are hello hi
Jack.
Yes, and thanks for joining us this session. This is a special session for the event. We will be talking about the sustainabilities. Okay, but first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself just briefly, because we already have the session for brand interview for both of you already. Okay, Daniel, please go first.
So yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm a chef by trade, actually. My day job is a chef, but I'm also one of the founders of 3D Cacao and very strong in sustainability. Sustainability is a big mission also of what we're doing in this chocolate brand, and very excited to talk about it in more detail today.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Okay, and next one, Neil, please.
Hi, I'm Neil from the CEO and co-founder of Siamaya Chocolate up here in Chiang Mai. And, we're also have sustainability as one of our core features and one of the reasons we got interested in starting a chocolate factory as well. So I'm excited to join Jack and Daniel and talk about that today.
Okay, thank you. So three of us, we believe in the sustainabilities. That's why we start this kind of business, and this is a concept of how we developing the business onward. Okay, but first of all, I think many people wonder about the definition of sustainabilities, right? Since this topic talk a lot around the world and there are so many definitions, okay, I would like to know about how you give the definition for this word sustainability. Okay, Daniel, you go first.
I think we cannot, if we try to get to the bottom of how to define sustainability, we won't get to talk about chocolate at all. That is indeed a very, very difficult and much debated topic. I think you can, like one thing you can say for sure is that sustainability is more than just environmental concern. It's not just it's not just a tree hugger sort of saving nature idea, but it is really the idea of doing business sustainably. So building something that can last for generations, leaves a positive legacy. We have kids, right? So like leave something for the kids behind, treat the planet with respect, and treat other people with respect. And I always like to say the planet doesn't really care what we do as humans, whether we destroy it or not. The planet's gonna continue to do its thing, I'm quite sure. maybe even better without humans around. So sustainability is not just about the planet. It is mostly about keeping the planet in the best condition for us to live on it and for us to grow and to grow further. That sort of is for me, the central idea of sustainability.
Oh, okay. That's your own definition and great because I also have kids too, right? If we want to pass on this planet to our kids for the next generation, right? So we have to preserve that. And what we can preserve is what we are doing now today, right? That's effect for the future for sure. Okay, let's see, Niels. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Daniel put it nicely. For me, I think about how do we continue the production of cacao, the consumption of cacao, for the long term. To me, sustainability is about making sure that all levels are not being exploited, but being maintained and thriving. So if you're harvesting and growing cacao in an unsustainable way, you're negatively impacting the environment and reducing the ability of the ecosystem to continue healthy production of cacao. Similarly, if farmers are getting paid almost nothing for their efforts, they're not going to be able to keep farming cacao. So that, is a sustainable area. And then same with businesses. Businesses have to be able to manufacture and sell their products in a way that they can pay their staff well and feel like they've got the incentives to continue to work and grow. So I think sustainability is kind of this term that describes so many different issues, but we can kind of think of how is the environment being treated, and is it healthy and going to last for the long term, and is society going to do the same, and is the economy, individual businesses going to do the same?
Oh, okay. So I can bring this one. This is quite old models, but it actually the news just said, right? We are on the impact of these three things, and actually this is quite more understandable, right? We're talking about this not just only environment, but also we care about the social, on the people, how to especially for the farmer on agriculture, how do they live with the price, with the expense that they have to pay for every day, and then especially for the business as well. Since we are a chocolate maker, right, we have to move it on. So it is quite not so easy, right, to get into the equilibrium at the center point sustainable way. Okay, but before we go to that, well, I think everyone has the story, especially when I interview with Daniel. You have the story of the mission of your brand. Can you share it with us?
Yeah, we just talked about it the other day at the brand interview, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but sort of what happened or what drove us at Preety, or me particularly, into exploring the idea of making chocolate in Thailand was I was at a conference, and there was a speaker, and this was about almost 3 years ago now. There was a speaker that sort of told us as present people in the events industry and chefs that if we wanted to do more sustainable menus, the only option was to stop using beef, stop using dairy products, refrain from using chocolates, and refrain from using coffee. And he made that argument from the carbon footprint of those products, from the water footprint of those products. And it just didn't sit well with me. It just didn't feel like I was willing to accept that. And at that time, there was quite a bit. I had good arguments when it came to coffee. Coffee, Thailand was quite established at that point already. And from a Thai perspective, right, I felt I had something to say. Beef is very difficult to argue. And there's a very good point there. But for chocolate, it was sort of the first time I was told that chocolate is one of the big evils in sustainability. And it really sent me down this track and this rabbit hole where I try to understand, firstly, why is there nothing local? Like, where are the local chocolate brands? Where are the big brands? And as I said 3 years ago, this was pretty scarce in Thailand. Now it's a very different situation. Like today, quite different with a lot of makers on the scene. But 3 years ago, there wasn't much. And also, I couldn't understand why is there not more cacao being grown in Thailand? Like, what's the issue? What's the problem? And yeah, this finally, through a lot of missteps and learning, led to pretty cacao review today.
Okay. Oh, you just said that 3 things is beef, chocolate, coffee. That's the evil for sustainability. I'm just shocked because this is 3 of my favorite foods.
It's your fault, Chad. It's your fault. You're responsible for global warming.
I am a part of global warming, the big part. Okay, but well, continue with Niels. I just talked to Neil that it is accidentally that Niels also give a lecture on this sustainability course for some students too. I want you to share some this point, Neil. Oh, I'm sorry. Your voice is now mute.
So I have a PhD in environmental science, and one of the things that drew me to that was kind of issues of agriculture and climate change. I was in India and was interviewing these small farmers who were no longer able to farm regularly because monsoons were now becoming so inconsistent and unpredictable. So that kind of got me on my academic path, which led in kind of a roundabout way to starting a chocolate company because while I was doing my dissertation writing, not related to chocolate, I happened to come upon some small craft chocolate makers who were buying local beans in Africa and making chocolate, and kind of made me think of this whole idea. Right now, most chocolate is grown in tropical regions of the world and then shipped to Europe or US to be manufactured and then shipped back down to those countries to try to sell them excess,
That's the reason, right? That's the reason
Right.
of global warming.
And it's not just, from the sustainability side, certainly you've got these global warming issues from transportation and things, but many of the farmers and communities that grow the cacao are not benefiting really from the production and sale of chocolate. Most of the wealth that's generated is in the US and Europe. And so my idea was, why don't we move manufacturing of chocolate to the countries where the cacao beans are grown? That way you reduce the amount of transportation issues, but you're also, all the value add from creating a final product is staying in the country. And that is sustainability for local communities and local production of cacao. That's a more holistic approach, in my opinion, because then if Siamaya can start selling chocolate all over the world, all the money stays in Thailand, and all the cacao that we buy is money that goes to the farmers. Whereas if I was to start the same Siamaya in the US, all the money would be there except for the little bit that I buy from farmers. So I really think for some of these products that are grown in the tropics, it's a great opportunity to move manufacturing and the value add in the supply chain to those countries.
Okay. Wow, I totally agree with you. So I think this is a clue that most of the chocolate is manufactured in Europe and the United States. And you just said that the transportation, this took so much gasoline, right? And that's make carbon dioxide too much. That's the cause of global warming. So if we can do the chocolate in the growing country, maybe chocolate is not top 3, right, Daniel? It can bring down the chocolate to
transportation actually is only a small fraction of where the carbon footprint lies in chocolate. but definitely would help not transporting it. Absolutely.
Okay.
So Neil has a slide later. We will look in a bit more detail and where you actually calculate most of the carbon footprint in chocolate. But transportation definitely helps. But overall, this is true for almost all agriculture products. Transportation is usually overrated. When you look like from a consumer perspective, when you look at sort of the split of carbon footprint of food products, most of the time people say avoid imported products because surely the flight here must be the biggest part of the carbon, and it is a noticeable part of the carbon, but a lot more has to do with soil management, with fertilizers used, has to do with land use in general, like say deforestation and so on. That's where a lot more carbon lies than in the pure transportation of the product.
All right, so we will go to that and cover all things about the cacao, all right, sustainabilities. So I would like to start with this one, the problem of the cacao sustainabilities. Yeah, what is the problem here? I think most of the consumer, they don't know at all, right? They just go to supermarket and buy chocolate and enjoy the chocolate bar, which maybe they don't care what happened, or maybe they don't know that piece of information. Okay, so I think Daniel, you can start with that, right? Okay, I share the slide for you. Okay,
yeah,
please.
so I just mapped out a few problems that I think are interesting for people to know, and like you said, Jack, they might not be as common knowledge as you think, or a lot of the things might be not so well known. People buy chocolate brands and they don't think so much about it. A first fact that I put out there, because I think it's quite important to understand when we look at sustainability in chocolate, 60% of the world harvest of cacao beans, actually it's 60 to 70%, the accurate number sort of varies between the 60 and the 70% mark of the world's harvest of cacao comes from Western Africa. And notably, mostly 40% of that is from Cote d'Ivoire, from the Ivory Coast. And then the rest comes out of Ghana and a few other countries around there. So it's mostly the Ivory Coast and Ghana that produce a huge part of the world's cacao. And why this is a problem, we'll go into a little bit later. But I think it's very important to remember when we talk about chocolate, when we talk about cacao, it is not so much a spread across the globe problem, but when you look at where does cacao come from, mostly it is a huge part that comes out of these 2-3 countries from Western Africa. Cacao is grown currently, the latest estimate from 2019 estimates that it's about 5 million independent small farmers that actually grow cacao, which also is quite an interesting thing to remember. So cacao is not it's not a lot of big players that do the growing, but it's in fact a lot of small farms, small livelihoods with very small budgets, with sort of a very small footprint, growing cacao independently and selling to the big players. And this leads into the next fact that sort of maybe already outlines why this is a big problem. At the same time, 70% of the global cacao trade is processed by Barry Callebaut and Cargill. So while it is actually 5 million independent different farmers, 70% of that bean is traded and processed by just 2 companies. And there you already see that this in and of itself cannot be a fair distribution. And there's a lot of questions that immediately come up when you see this mapped out. So 60% from Western Africa, 5 million farmers globally, but then 70% of that farm product is actually processed just by 2 companies. And a lot of other companies that sell chocolate buy some sort of pre-processed product or cacao beans through Barry Callebaut or Cargill. So even other chocolate makers or famous chocolate makers in Europe and the US, as Neil said, are dependent on the supply chain, are dependent on the cacao bean supply chain. So are buying beans that went through the hands, went through the value add, went through the processing of those two corporations a lot of the time.
See. So this is dominated by just two companies.
Basically, yes. So
they can
two
control.
companies.
Yeah, they can control the amount of the beans around the world, right?
Yeah. Then I just want to add a few more facts about the cacao tree itself. So the cacao tree is a shade-loving plant. So actually, traditionally in the Amazon forest, where cacao comes from, it grows sort of under a lot of other trees. It grows in areas in neighborhood of a lot of other trees, and it loves the shade. So it loves to grow as a canopy layer under a huge amount of high trees. That is sort of the natural cacao tree. So as you can imagine, it's not very well suited for plantations. When you think of plantations, banana plantations, and so on, you think of rows and rows of the same plant, right? Just drop there. And this is not easy to maintain with cacao, because what cacao loves is growing in the neighborhood of other plants and using their shade, sort of sitting under other plants, which is not the most economically viable way to grow, because obviously the most yield you get out of single crop plantations. This is one of the problems we have around the actual tree. Another thing that's to do with the tree is so when you plant seedlings until you harvest the first harvest of beans is 3 to 5 years, which anyone who works sort of in rural agriculture or in areas where farmers actually live hand to mouth of what they grow, that's a very long time. Like it's a difficult investment to make if you know that maybe your first time you actually make money from it is in 3 to 5 years time, right? That in addition, and there you see on the other side, the best yield you get out of those trees until they reach about 25 years of age. So you have those 20 sweet spot years between 5 years and 25 years where the cacao trees produce serious yield, because a lot of the small farms in Africa especially can't afford to restock with seedlings. They leave the trees a lot longer, and that doesn't hurt the trees. The cacao trees grow a lot older. They grow 40 years or more. Only the yield reduces year on year, which obviously is a problem for a farmer because they have less to sell. But they often cannot afford the investment of adding new seedlings or taking out old stock. Another problem we do have with cacao, and luckily not at all in Thailand at this point in time, but it has happened also in countries in Southeast Asia. It's actually quite a sturdy plant, but there is a few diseases that hit it. And when they hit it, and the cacao tree is planted in a plantation style, like in a sort of like more economic way of a lot of trees next to each other, especially sort of taken out of their natural, more shaded and mixed use terrain, then they're quite susceptible to plant diseases. And like witch's broom is a great example. We see this over and over again in Latin America, where entire countries drop by 50%, 60% or more in yield in certain years where they deal with this fungal infection. But also we had Malaysia a few years ago had a little moth that attacks cacao tree roots, and they basically weren't able to produce any yield at all, the entire country, for a few years until they had this under control. So the cacao tree is sturdy in and of itself as a left alone, it's in its natural habitat. But when taken out of that and moved into a plantation setting, then it is quite susceptible to diseases, and a lot of them are hard to control. Another thing I wanted to put out there is it's quite a thirsty tree. So it does use a lot of water, and naturally because it grows around the equator, right? So it's used to the rains where it rains a lot. So it does take about 1,500 millimeters per year of rain or more to grow cacao with good yield. This again is not a problem if you grow it in the right regions, right? Like in Thailand, we do have sufficient amount of rains. They grow really well with the natural water. The problem is if you move it in plantations, again, you have the issue that you might have to irrigate or you might have to add water because you can't get enough water on it. If the sunlight shines directly on the trees, they lose a lot more water. There's a lot more water coming out than if they're shaded. So this is a potential issue, especially in regions where there is a problem with rainfall or where there isn't enough natural water. And the last thing I put there is pioneer fronts. This was the tag word actually, and this is maybe a little piece of information that also a lot of people didn't know. So especially in Western Africa, in the regions where we now see a lot of cacao coming from, this was actually a development goal. So a lot of development money from Europe and also from the US went into the Ivory Coast, went into Ghana to build cacao plantations as a cash crop to support the local economy. And what was done back then is what they called pioneer fronts, so clearing out massive amounts of rainforest to put cacao plantations instead. And this was based on the idea that this is helping farmers to make a living, helping farmers to sort of build up a cash crop that they can live off in the long term. So it was looked at a way of supporting long term with the development money. But obviously there's a lot of problems attached to clearing rainforest, and that's also where we see a lot of the carbon footprint when we start chopping down trees to grow cacao.
Okay, so at this point, I used to see the clip from YouTube about this thing, Pioneer Fronts, that they try to investigate how they cut the forest to grow cacao, just like you said, and the investment from the Europe that put in just like the invisible force people to do that for money, right? It's a business. Yeah. I would like to ask Neil. Neil, you are the teacher that teach about the agriculture sustainability too. You want to add something into this slide?
I think just to reiterate that point that, from at least from a climate change perspective, there's no way that you can cut down forest and plant a plantation and it have a positive climate. Like, it can't be sustainable related to climate change. Even if it's a well-maintained plantation and lasts 50 years, that really diversity of species in a forest can't be replaced by a plantation. And so even in Thailand, if farmers are cutting down forests to plant cacao, even if they do a really good job maintaining that cacao, it's still, with regards to climate change, not going to be a climate, like a carbon sustainable solution. However, as Daniel pointed out, cacao loves shade. So the way around that, of course, is to kind of plant cacao in forests, and then you can benefit from both, make some money off of the forest by having your cacao in the shade of the forest tree cover.
Okay,
But I think we'll
so yeah,
talk about that more in a bit.
this is a good point. So if you audience, you listen to this live and then you're starting to interesting to growing cacao, so we all agree that you shouldn't have do the single plantation of cacao. If you can do some shading, that's best for the tree and best for the planet as well. Okay, Daniel, you continue this one.
And now this slide sort of shows what is usually referred to when people talk about sustainability issues in cacao. A lot of the time it's about people challenges, about people issues. And this again leads back to the fact that most of the cacao comes from Western Africa. And most of the chocolates people buy and eat are a blend of chocolate beans, of cacao beans. So the single origin thing is something that's very specific for bean to bar. It's very, like, the big companies do not go through the effort of tracing back which cacao goes into where. Cacao beans are cacao beans and they're traded as cacao beans, and a lot of the processes of professional big scale chocolate making are about sort of equalizing the flavor anyway. So when you buy a chocolate bar, there's most likely those 60% of Western African beans in it. no matter what label, no matter what brand. So you're dealing immediately with those challenges that we have in Western Africa. So one problem for the farmers is the so-called farm gate price. Neil will talk a little bit more about the pricing of cacao. But in addition to the problem of the world market commodity price of cacao, what is actually paid to the farmer is the so-called farm gate price. And this is regulated by the governments in Ghana and in the Ivory Coast. So they monitor sort of the commodity price of cacao, and then they set a fixed farm gate price for a year, and that's what the farmer gets for their cacao. So obviously that's already a very questionable setup. So a lot of the time, even if cacao prices do rise, or if there's a shortage of beans or whatever, the farmers do not benefit from it because all they get paid is the farm gate price. In those countries also, we deal with a great bit of political instability. Luckily, not so much in the last...
Daniel, sorry. I interrupt you on this thing. Because right now in Thailand, there is no farm gate price right now, right? But
no, this is specific for Western Africa. So only the Western African governments, they set that farm gate price. So farmers are not free to sell at whatever price, but they have to follow the set cacao bean price by the government. Because like when you look at the Ivory Coast, Neil, you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that what Daniel is trying to suggest is that if you're consuming chocolate right now, any of the main brands of chocolate, you're contributing to these issues. So if you as a consumer want to be sustainably minded, this is one of the downsides of eating chocolate where you don't know where the origin of the beans come from. So it is, even though it's not Thailand specific, it's certainly specific to Thai consumers because we buy all imported chocolates, right? Most consumers are buying imported chocolates.
And whether you buy a Kit Kat or whether you buy a Mars bar or whether you buy a Cadbury's bar, it's pretty certain that about 60 to 70% of the beans in that bar are from Western Africa.
They are all imported right now.
Yeah, because also these companies are not interested in sort of figuring out, or like they don't, also when you look at the sales price of these products, like it's not about sort of selecting the beans for this product, but just buying the best value bean you can buy. And that is a mix of whatever. And most of whatever comes from Western Africa.
So you think that the farm gate price is a problem, right?
It's a problem for the farmers in Western Africa because they do not benefit from whatever happens in the cacao trade, and they're not free to make their own pricing. They can't say, look, I put more work into my bean and it's better, it tastes better than my neighbors. That is not a consideration, but they still follow the farm gate price because they have to sell to sort of a reseller structure. So the government says, you grow cacao, this is what you get, full stop. How much?
This is all controlled by the government, right?
Yeah, correct.
And as a secondary impact, it also means that if you're a cacao farmer outside of West Africa, right, like the reason cacao price is low is because governments can set the price in West Africa where most of the cacao is produced. And so if you're a farmer in Thailand and you want to sell to one of these big cacao processors, they're not going to buy your cacao if it's 3 times the price of West African cacao, right? And so having, if the cacao price goes up for the lowest pricing, all the other farmers benefit from that because they can then demand a higher price globally.
Okay. Yeah, so we will elaborate on this one because Neil have information for us too. Okay, please continue, Daniel.
So political instability is an issue in Western Africa, right? We've seen the civil wars there. We've seen a lot of problems there. Basically, especially Ivory Coast, cacao is their biggest export. It's the biggest part that contributes to their GOP. So with buying any chocolate, you also contribute to whatever the government is doing in Western Africa, not knowingly, but like you can't deny it. That's just how it is. Still, and even though there's been a lot of a lot of effort from the United Nations, from a lot of other NGOs working in the area to crack down on forced labor, human trafficking, and especially child labor in the cacao trade. In Western Africa, it continues to be a problem. Like it continues to be something that is challenging because a lot of these small farmers cannot afford to hire official labor. So there is a lot of forced labor, and there's especially a lot of child labor, which is really shocking actually. And there's a lot of efforts in this direction, especially trying to eliminate at least the child labor in the cacao trade in Western Africa, but it is still a problem nonetheless.
Yeah, I would like to add some more comment on this one because I face the real experience when I go to exhibition and mostly like international events. Most of the foreigner that comes to my booth and they ask a lot about the child labor on our chocolate, which is not the normal question in Thailand at all. You guys have the same experience about this one when you sell chocolate?
I think in Europe, especially, there has been a lot of awareness campaigns and there has been a lot of public talk on this problem. And so also some chocolate companies openly address that. There's maybe Tony Chocoloni, strongest of all, from the Netherlands, who basically make that their sales mission to sell anti-slavery and anti-child labor. So like I think it is a topic that's much more like people are much more aware of. And I think in the next slide we'll talk about certifications, but I think you see that also when you look at sales of certified chocolates. Fair trade is the biggest selling label on chocolates in Europe, and that's due to the fact that there is a lot of awareness on the slavery issue and the child labor issue.
Okay, Niels, you have the issue about that. You have experience about this issue, the forced and child labor.
Yeah, certainly it's something that we can discuss. One of the benefits of being able to buy our cacao directly from farmers or from fermentation centers in Thailand is that we can go and visit the farm and we can ensure that there's no child labor or forced labor that's taking place, and that works when the price of cacao is high enough that a farmer can employ people and make money. And so again, these sorts of issues all relate to the fact that if you don't have sustainability in the growing and for those farmers, if they aren't able to sustain a ethical farming practices, then you've got these problems.
Okay, so this kind of problem is, I think I can say that this is not the problem in Thailand at all for the child labor and forced labor, because the problem here is we lack of the labor, right? So,
but again, I want to stress that like it's absolutely right that it's not a problem at all for Thai grown cacao. But like Neil rightfully pointed out before, it is a problem for consumers in Thailand just as much as everywhere else in the world, because any chocolate bar you pick up from 7-Eleven has this problem baked into it, right? Like any chocolate bar that you buy from a big brand, sort of on some level also deals with this problem. And so with your dollars, with your Thai baht, you do vote for or against these issues every day, constantly.
And again, cacao is a global commodity, which now means that it's all connected. So anything that's happening in one region of the world, either directly or indirectly, is affecting here, right? The price for cacao right now is about 60 baht a kilo being traded globally. A farmer in Thailand who's getting paid 60 baht a kilo for their fermented and dried cacao beans would probably need to employ slave or child labor to get that price, right?
They cannot live.
Well, otherwise they would farm something else because they can't make a living off of that price. And so this is the link as well. Is we can't have sustainable production of cacao if one part of the world people have to use slave labor and child labor because the price is so low. Because that affects us here, because now a farmer can't compete. A farmer can't farm ethically and sell it at commodity price rates because they'll make no money, right?
Yeah, that's true. So this is a real challenging to balance between the commodities price and the real local living price.
And if it was just, if Thailand only consumed and grew all the cacao in itself, then we could be removed from these issues. But since it's all connected with global trade, we're connected to these issues and have to consider them.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so next, Daniel.
Yeah. So the next topic that is a people problem is the lack of knowledge. As we saw in the first slide, it is a lot of, it's like 5 million independent small farms. I'm sure a lot of listeners we have on the call today have maybe tried to grow cacao beans or are currently starting to grow cacao beans, and do start to understand that it's not just throwing a tree in the garden and then pick the finished chocolate from the tree. So it is quite technically challenging, not only the growing, but then especially also the fermentation. And I think a lot of the growers that we have in the country at the moment starting to experience that painfully, how difficult it is to go from pod to actual sellable product. And so all of these small farms don't have the necessary knowledge, are not equally as good as each other. So some do this better, some do this worse. And in Western Africa, you have the added problem that chocolate isn't even a good people can afford or eat. So it's also, they don't have the connection to an outcome of a product that they actually know, but they're just doing something the way they were told or shown how to do it. And all of these beans, so that there's two challenges in this. Actually, the one challenge is mycotoxins, so like molds and all kinds of problems in the actual bean that make it unusable later, or only usable as say B or C grade, or only maybe for industrial cocoa butter. That's one issue that we have with this, and this obviously reduces global yield again. It reduces cacao yield, which has impacts everywhere on price, on a scarcity of cacao, but it also has an added problem that those farmers are not, like, there's no incentive for them to sort of further grow. Like, they don't understand how to make it a profitable business. And this sort of leads to the fact, what you see there at the bottom, you have added, like, sometimes to achieve better results, you might have to invest in the business as well. Like we said before, maybe you have to buy new seedlings, or maybe you have to come up with a smarter technical solution to fermentation. All of this needs money. And in Western Africa, there is also currently no more models that support credits for small farmers. So a lot of them are not able to get new cash into the business. And so when you're already in a situation where you have bad yields, difficult pricing structure, sort of hardly get by, there's also very little opportunity to reinvest in the business and make it more modern and better. And this leads, even with very good farmers, over a short period of time into this poverty trap, where they really grow just to keep the business alive, but actually cannot live of it. And that again, then obviously, and Neil pointed it out too, leads again to, you have to cut costs somewhere. And where do you do that? With labor, maybe. It leads to forced labor. It leads to all kinds of questionable decisions in the business that are definitely not sustainable, just because somehow you need to keep the thing running. You need to keep the doors open. I also added here, there's little incentive to certify your beans. Next slide talks about certification. Certification is a good step in the right direction, but if you can't even afford the business you're running now, or you already struggle to keep the business running, and there's no huge incentive for you to invest further and go through the difficult process of actually becoming a certified cacao grower.
Okay. So this is I think this this is also the problem in agriculture in Thailand when you're talking about this. In Thailand, we grow a lot of rice, you see, and there is some like in credit that you said in here. This is a poverty trap. So people have to do the agriculture to pay the debt. They cannot get rid of the debt at all. This is like an evil circle all around. And the thing you said, this is the same thing, right? In Africa. And yeah, Niels, do you have any opinion about this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, just like you've mentioned, Jack, that issue of, these issues that Daniel has mentioned are also possibilities, like potential bad outcomes for Thai agriculture and farmers as well. So it's not just that this is problems happening halfway across the world. These are all things that can be problems for Thai cacao farmers as well, if we don't have sustainable minded solutions, and we are thinking about we're not just thinking about Thai cacao today, but we're thinking about Thai cacao 100 years from now, and we make our decisions today based on what it's going to be in 100 years. And that's one of the great things about Thailand, is that we're right at the infancy, so we can make good decisions now that will make sure that 100 years from now, the great grandchildren of the cacao farmers can still grow cacao and make a living. And the chocolate makers can still make a living and make their chocolate in 100 years.
Okay.
Whereas if we just think about what are we going to do for this year or next year, we'll fall into these same issues for sure.
Okay, so let me summarize a little bit about this one. We are in the starting period of the cacao in Thailand, and these are the problems that maybe many decades in Africa, and I think we have lesson already. For the, I don't know, maybe this is too big for us. It's about government, but we are all engaged in this problem at all. So we are in the first step of the cacao growing. So if we doing the right way, the right thing, we will not repeat this problem as if the farmers in Africa did. Okay, so I think we can help each other to find out some solution here too. I believe that. Okay, you want to mention in the last slide, Daniel? Is this the solution for all the sustainabilities?
Yeah, I just want to touch on this quickly, because now we switch to a consumer's perspective, sort of from you standing in the supermarket, which chocolate should I buy, right? And a lot of the time, that's also a request we get a lot here. I'm sure Neil hears that a lot. A lot of businesses that are now understanding a bit better what sustainable really means, and that it is important, and that also say, as a hotel, as a restaurant, as a coffee shop, we should focus on selling the right product. A question that we hear a lot is, are you certified? Do you have some sort of certification? What sustainability certification do you have? And I just mapped a few out here, because a lot of the time it is perceived as the best solution, like the best solution to this problem that we mapped out here now is, okay, just buy a certified chocolate and you're done with it, right? And here you see sort of the biggest labels. There's about 20 different agencies that certify chocolate or cacao in one way or another for sustainability, but the most well-known now is the organic certification. That's from Calbo directly. Calbo does organic cacao. That's one of their trade lines. They certify that themselves. Then there's UTC certified, which has merged last year with Rainforest Alliance. So now it's Rainforest Alliance and UTC is the same label. There used to be two in the past, but some people might know the UTC label still very well. But the Rainforest Alliance is at the moment the biggest in terms of global sales of certified chocolate. And then down there at the bottom, you have the Fair Trade and the Fair Trade Cocoa label. which are also quite well known and well recognized, I think. And a lot of people ask for fair trade, like you mentioned before, especially in Europe. In Europe, these are very popular labels. So I just want to point out in what way certification is better than not certified cacao, and in what way there's still questions in regards to certification. So a very positive thing we see is that the market share of certified cacao is rapidly growing. And the first sort of data I have is from 2014, where globally traded certified cacao was only about 5% of the global traded cacao. In 2019, I looked this up yesterday, the latest number is 22% of all traded cacao is with one label or another certified, which is that is quite positive, and it's a positive development to see that we do have an ever growing consumer demand for a better and more sustainable cacao, and the market responds, and we have more certified labels available and a higher market share of certified cacao. The problem with that is the 30% rule. So even the strictest of labels, which is the Rainforest Alliance, has a rule that it is sufficient that 30% of the main ingredient for a product originate from a certified plantation. So it means if you buy a certified chocolate, it doesn't mean that there's only certified cacao in there, because as we pointed out before, it's a big globally traded commodity. It's not like you have a certified farm over here and you have a non-certified farm over there, and that cacao is packed separately and traded separately. That's not the case, but all of that is thrown together. The only thing that to get that label is that as a chocolate producer, you have to guarantee that 30% of the main ingredient of your product, say if you do cookies, then the main ingredient might be just the chocolate covering the chocolate cookie, so it's even less compared to total product weight, and 30% of that has to originate from a certified plantation. That is sufficient to get the stamp, right? So when you know this, you do understand also when you next time you go to the supermarket, I challenge you to pick up a few bars, and especially the certified ones, and say you have a bar that's certified, say Ecuadorian cacao, like you have a certified Rainforest Alliance certified chocolate bar with Ecuadorian cacao. There's a very high chance that still a huge amount of the cacao in there is from Western Africa, but 30% of that cacao is that specified high cost label from Ecuador mixed in with the rest to reach the certification standard. And then you are officially allowed to sell this as a Ecuadorian certified Rainforest Alliance bar. So I think it's
tricky, nah?
Like you can say it's tricky, but this is the legal framework. So the companies that are doing this, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just following the legal framework. From the Rainforest Alliance perspective, you have to understand that they are thinking, okay, it's better to action than not to action, right? On the side of doing something, and we'll try to make that stricter and stricter. When they started 10 years ago, that was a 20% rule. Now it's the 30%, rule, right? So, like, I think in their view, at some point we will reach that 100%, but they're hoping to grow the market slowly in that direction, right? So I think there's no, like from the certifying bodies, they feel like, okay, we're doing the right thing, we're pushing the market in the right direction. From the companies, from the producing companies, they're saying, look, we keep the price down so people buy it, but there's a market demand from consumers now to have more certified chocolates. So we'll do one with a stamp, right? It'll cost us a little bit more because we have to buy a part of a certified cacao to mix in there. But as a consumer, you might have the perception, oh, I'm buying a perfect chocolate. And that's not the case. This is what I want to make very, very clear, that like you pick up this product from the shelf, you're not buying what you maybe think you're buying, right? This is very important to know. And when you look on the packaging of those products, a lot of the time it says something like sometimes it says contains at least something percent. Sometimes it just says contains Ecuadorian cacao, right? Or whatever, or you name it, right? So but it definitely isn't a single origin bar in the way the bean to bar world or our small chocolate making world understands a single origin bar. It's because the scale is very different, and at that scale, the beans we are working with don't exist. They're not there, right? Like you can't guarantee the amount of beans that for a lot of these labels it's even worth to come up with a packaging, right?
Okay.
So
Well,
this
that's great to invoke the conscious about this one for the consumer. When I think I'm thinking about I want to do some research about this one to grab the chocolate bar from the supermarket that has this kind of certification and look into the detail of the ingredients and find out what is the fact there.
And I tell you, it's very similar, like with a lot of sustainability issues in fast moving, low profit industries, like similar in fashion. A lot of the time, even the producers won't be able to tell you exactly where the cacao in there comes from. They will not know. The same way when you buy, say, a shirt from Zara or H&M or from any big fashion label, they will not be able to tell you 100% where the cotton comes from that's in there, right? Because that's not how supply chains work. The supply chains for these low margin products, where actually everyone just makes a very little margin on trading it because you want to keep the price down so low, everything is traded in bulk, in huge bulk. So stuff is thrown together, and you can't trace back like this. You cannot, you know, like even those certified bars, the best they can tell you is exactly what they got the certificate from. So they can probably tell you, okay, 30% of the main ingredient is from this farm, but what the rest is, they cannot tell you.
Okay, so so consumer will know that we are talking about the bulk cacao, you know, the bulk cacao that mostly from the West Africa, and well, I think we should trying to, for the consumer, we trying to look for the fine cacao, and as Daniel said, it's depend on the certification, but we don't know exactly the real fact that which farm, or is there any issue about the source of the cacao farm that real sent into that product. Niels, you want to add something? This one, I would like to ask you a question. As you are the chocolate makers, do you serious, or do you really care about this kind of certification? What's your opinion?
You know, I think on one side, a consumer, you know, if consumers demand those kind of certifications, we are drawn to pursue them. If they're going to pick, an imported chocolate because it has one of those labels over my chocolate, even though I know the farmer that I'm buying the cacao from, you're kind of forced to pursue those labels, even if it doesn't really have much meaning in that case, right? I mean, if I'm paying the farmer, I mean, I think for the fair trade, it's something like 10% above commodity price is what the farmer has to get. Well, we're paying farmers 3 times commodity price, right? and so the fair trade certification is kind of meaningless in that instance, because we're already paying the farmer way more than we would be required to by fair trade. However, you know, if consumers are demanding those kind of certifications, we are kind of drawn to get them. However, we try to communicate the values that those certifications also communicate in other ways as well. So.
Okay, so now you just opened the new topic about the pricing. So I think you've got some more information about that. So
can I just close the slide, because there's one more point on that slide, the last one.
Sorry.
So there's also, like, as I mentioned before, and I didn't prepare a slide for that now, but you could also show that nicely on a graph. The demand for chocolate globally is still rising year on year. There's a rising demand on cacao beans. And of that complete demand for cacao and the rising demand of cacao, also the market share, as we discussed, for certified cacao is increasing year on year. So the amount of certified cacao that's now looked for year on year is bigger and bigger, right? Like it's growing very fast, that market segment. At the same time, we said before, making fermented cacao is quite difficult. Getting a certification is something that costs you more money, right? As a farmer, there's a cost impact there. You have to go through the process of getting certified. You have to pay someone to do the certification. You have to get recertified all the time. And a lot of the time you might have to invest also in how you run your business to achieve the certification. The financial gain is minimal. Like Neil said, it's like between 10 to 30% that you make more on a kilo of cacao usually. So you might have a return on investment that's more than 2 years or something. So for a lot of farmers that live day on day on their cacao, that's not realistic. So what we have there is an added problem is that a lot of the farms that were the first sort of the best businesses, the sort of poster child businesses of already doing a good operation, are well run with a lot of knowledge. They're all certified by now. The question is, who are the next people that can still be certified, and how far can you take that without getting into a situation where there's just no one that applies anymore, or that sort of has the potential even to be a well-run certified cacao farm. And this is already a point where we are now. And what we see now already is that a lot of the farms that already have one certification end up doing more than one and are double or triple certified because they already have the process in place. There is an incentive for those labels to push for more and more product to be available because the market demand is there. So instead of teaching more farmers to grow better, we have the same farmers growing the same, but then have more than one label. So they are then maybe Rainforest Alliance and organic and. But it doesn't help the industry overall to grow better cacao, more sustainable cacao.
Okay, wow, that's a great point. So thank you for sharing all of this issue about the cacao, about our challenges here. Okay, I think the listener will get the whole point of cacao situation. But on another issue about the economical, to make the cacao sustainability for the business. So I think Niels have the information here to share with us. Okay, Niels.
Yeah, so I'll just be pretty brief. Basically, what I want to show is just a few charts that show the pricing and price volatility for cacao to make a point later that that we need to increase, we need to be able to justify a higher price of cacao for farmers. So this is the price, the cacao price, global cacao price since COVID hit in January last year, just until August or September. And you can see that the price went from about $1.8 per kilo, this is price per ton, up to about $2 per kilo, down to $1.6 per kilo. So 6 months ago, the commodity price for cacao was 45 baht a kilo. And from what we know, buying cacao directly from farmers here, I mean, nobody is selling it at 45 baht a kilo. And in fact, if it was 45 baht a kilo, they wouldn't bother farming cacao.
That's right.
But you can also see how much price fluctuates and how these kind of global trends are affecting the price of cacao. So why don't you go to that next slide?
Okay, next one. Okay.
Yeah, so this chart is also showing, from 1980 to 2012, that the actual, this is the green line is the cacao price. So in 2012, the price of cacao was about $2.50 per kilo. Right now, from that, right now it's probably a little under $2 a kilo. But the gray line is the inflation adjusted price. So in 1980, if you sold cacao at $2 a kilo, the actual amount of money you had for buying stuff would be kind of the equivalent of $5 a kilo now. So, 150 baht per kilo is what the value of that money would have been, even though you're selling it at 60 baht a kilo. But the price of cacao has not gone up significantly, yet the value of the money that farmers make has just gone down to where it is today. And so basically, the price of cacao has not increased, but the actual amount of the value of that money that farmers make has, decreased with inflation over the years. And so now from 1980 to now, basically the value of that cacao that a farmer is growing is half what it used to be. And then that third slide.
Okay, the third one.
This is showing how the price volatility has also increased with global cacao pricing, since 1995. So the amount that the price fluctuates each year has increased to about plus or minus 15% from where it used to be. So that means that a farmer is now less able to predict cacao price each year because the fluctuation is going up and down. So this is for global trade, like commodity cacao. And so one of the challenges for sustainability, as far as the economics for a farmer, is how do you get more like a more stable, higher value price for your cacao, so that you're not stuck in a decreasing. So you're not stuck in the global chain where the value of your cacao decreases every year, and it's more volatile, and you're competing with these other growers that are using unethical practices. And so I think that's one of the big challenges for Thailand, is how do we try to separate out our cacao supply chain from the global chain, and so that we demand a higher price, so that farmers are able to make a living off of it. And the way that we do that is, one, the quality of cacao has to be really good. And if the quality with the bean to bar chocolate trade, there people will pay 150, 200, 250, 300 baht a kilo if they know that it's really good quality and consistent cacao. So that's one thing our industry needs to develop over the coming years, is the farmer education, consistency, all those kind of things, so that when outside buyers or even local buyers come in to buy our cacao, the farmer can say, this is what we've got, a good quality product, and it's consistent, and we'll be able to produce this same quality in the future, and that's why you're paying a higher price for it. And the craft chocolate industry will be willing to pay that price. And then secondly, creating a industry for local chocolate that is, we buy the chocolate bars here in Thailand, and we're willing to pay a premium price for those chocolate bars and chocolate products, because we know that the farmer is also getting a higher cut. That's another way that we sustain a better economics around cacao in Thailand. Because if a consumer is going to price our chocolate bar compared to a Kit Kat, there's no way that anyone in the supply chain can compete with a Kit Kat pricing for a chocolate product, because then we're going to have to pay cacao prices that the global commodity price is, which right now is somewhere around 60 baht a kilo, right? If I make a chocolate bar that I can sell compared to the same price as a Hershey's bar or a Lindt chocolate bar, I need to be able to buy cacao at 60 baht a kilo. And so that is the problem, is we need to, part of our mission as chocolate makers and as cacao farmers, is we need to educate the public to be willing and eager to pay the true value price for chocolate, and chocolate products so that everyone on the supply chain is able to make a living wage off of the work that they're doing. And then in doing that, it will also have the benefit of allowing farmers to engage in more sustainable agricultural practices as well. They won't need to go and cut down forests to plant more cacao because they make enough money off of the cacao that they have, and they're willing to take care of the cacao trees that they have. And this is one of the problems. If the value of your cacao is decreasing every year, you then need to increase your cacao production every year. And you can't really, besides things like shade growing your cacao and pruning it and other sustainable best practices for cacao, you can't really force a certain amount of acreage to produce more cacao. You've got to go and find new acreage. And that's what's happening, why cacao is causing deforestation in some of these regions, is because the amount of money that farmers are making isn't increasing, and it's worth less each year. So they're forced to grow more and more and more and expand their plantations. So I think from our side as makers, just to kind of summarize, we need to be able to sustain higher prices to farmers for the cacao. We do that by educating consumers so us as chocolate makers do that by creating good products that people are willing to buy and want to buy, and we do it in a way that we can buy cacao from farmers at a fair price. And then cacao farmers on their side, they need to be trained and also maintain good quality so that they can always get higher prices.
I agree with Niels. This is one of our objective to create this kind of events as well, to make a move on the fine chocolate, on the craft chocolate, to make the people knows the values about the real chocolate, the real Thai chocolate. So we expect that the consumer, especially for the Thai consumer, please don't try to compare the price of the craft chocolate bar with the supermarket bar, because we cannot compare it at all. If you listen at the beginning of this session, you know exactly what Neil said about the price of the Thai cacao bean and the bulk African cacao bean is totally different. I agree 100%. Right now, it may be 4-5 times, or in some place up to 10 times already. But the things that if we do the real quality, I think that's maybe the only solution, right? That make a Thai cacao can exist, can more sustainable. But I have one question. Since this graph, this one, the price of cacao is, this is too short. This is for the COVID period, right? But
it was just showing how cacao demand has decreased.
Okay. I see. But looking at the price of cacao here from the 1980s up to 2012, okay, the price is not moving so much, right? It is quite a little bit stable. But what is the price for chocolate? I would like to ask Daniel, because you are a chef, right? Maybe you get involved with the price of the chocolate that used as an ingredient for the restaurant, for the hotel. The price, how the price is changing over time.
So the price for commodity chocolate also hasn't changed much. It's also very stable. The interesting thing is, and that's sort of my silver lining, or that's where I see a lot of hope in Thailand, is that since the bean to bar movement in the US, there is definitely a new perception of fine chocolates, as you call them, or like valuable high-end chocolates. And there is sort of a new market segments of chocolates that people are willing to pay more for. So your main sort of commodity chocolates to work with, they're still priced equally the same, and they haven't really changed. What has changed for sure is sort of like how much people are willing to pay for a praline or a high-end bar and so on. And a lot of chocolate makers over the last year have also tried to push that envelope a little bit and put bars out there, trying to story why they are special, why they are so expensive, and selling them for $20, $50, $80 a bar, right? Like you find a bar with very special cacao beans, hand picked in the Amazon, that sell for horrendous prices, for very steep prices, and people are willing to pay that. And I think the reason why I'm quite hopeful about that is because in the coffee industry, Thailand has also sort of jumped a lot of steps. And if you remember something like 8-10 years ago, there was no coffee culture in not even in Bangkok. There was nothing, right? People were drinking Nescafe, and that was it. And there was no like a hotel selling illy coffee was already sort of the most specialized high-end coffee you would find. And you look at Bangkok today, and anywhere like Chiang Mai, the same story. You look at Chiang Mai today, the amount of high-end roasters, high-end sort of baristas, coffee makers, it's incredible. And all of these people sell a cup of coffee today without this being outrageous, for 140 baht, 160 baht, or whatever, right? These are sort of standard prices for a high quality local coffee bean roasted coffee. And I'm just very hopeful that we can do, or we can pull off together as chocolate makers, something very similar in the chocolate scene, in the chocolate sphere, where we just jump a lot of steps and we go from those 7-Eleven chocolates that people have been eating in the past to really high-end fine chocolate and high-end chocolate bars made locally with local cacao, without having to go through the whole development of certifications and so on, where we can sort of replace all of this with the label, this is local, this is Thai beans, Thai made, Thai product, and that stands for the quality, and that guarantees basically that it's a product worth buying. And if we manage to do something similar in the chocolate industry, then I think Thailand can be sort of a one of a kind, because that would set a new example. Like right now, this sort of country doesn't exist. Vietnam is often used as an example of a place that managed to sell a lot of its own cacao as high quality. But Maru is just a small player still in Vietnam, and a lot of the Vietnamese cacao is actually sold to Calbo as well. Like Calbo trades a lot of Vietnamese cacao as well. So if we manage to pull this off as a Thai chocolate maker and cacao farmer sort of community, I think we could do something very similar to the coffee industry, and we could set an example of how this can work. How this can work, that we maintain high prices for farmers and high selling prices for producers, because customers trust that the label high chocolate is equal to the quality, to the flavor, to the taste that we all stand for, and the production methods on the farm.
Okay, so it sounds to me that the solution now is about the localization, the strong of the localization. If we can make the whole supply chain in the cacao in Thailand more stronger, and the consumer know more and give the values and pay more about the good chocolate, and everything can be like consumed locally and make the value locally and very strong inside, then I think this is like a model, so the global will believe us, will give a value of the real local values, right? So we don't have to stick to the commodity price. It can go up and down, but we have very strong, just like you say, with the coffee. Actually, the price of the coffee in Thailand is higher than the commodity coffee a lot.
Yeah.
So I think this is the same thing. It's just like we have the special, right? Special, like the market, special economy of this special stuff. Okay, so we have. Yep.
Sorry, Jack. Just I don't know if you prepared any pictures or if but I also feel it's important to stress that currently pretty much all the cacao grown in Thailand is grown mixed use. Like right now, even in the Philippines, a lot of cacao is actual plain cacao plantations. Whereas right now, all the big producers, they just sort of mix use land with, say, durian or jackfruit or mangosteen trees. There's a lot of mixed use grown cacao in Thailand, which also is a very, very special situation that doesn't exist like this globally.
Okay, I have some, but not too much pictures about that. But I can say that most of the, especially for yellow chocolate, we have the concept of the mixed plantation in one plant, in one crop. Okay, so this is like a theory of the passed away king Brahma IX, that he tried to introduce this concept to the farmers a lot, that don't just plant only one single plant, but plant many more in your land, and some more you can eat. You can do the vegetable, you can do the big tree to constructing your own house, something of this. This is a mixed use of the lands. That's the concept of our agriculture as well. And I think most of the farmers in Thailand, they follow this instruction, this philosophy of doing farming. So they didn't wait for the income from cacao only. This is I think this is a big difference from the Africans, right? We have the fruit, we can eat fruit. So if we can eat fruit, we don't have to pay money for the fruit, right? We can grow rice, we have rice to eat, we don't have to pay for the rice. So the expense of the family will reduce. This is the basic sustainability in Thailand, which is the very special place. I think Niels, you can mention more about that, because you study a lot of Thai agriculture, right? Please.
I'm not an expert on Thai agriculture, but I will be teaching a class, so I am learning, trying to learn quickly. So
okay. So this is a picture of our farm in Nan at the north of Thailand. So we have a lot. We have many fruits: durian, mangosteen, rambutan, longan, and we have cacao as well. We have banana, we have palm. So we have a lot of things mixed use in one mountain. And I think this is what Daniel trying to point out, right? Yeah, you want to mention more about this one?
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to point this out, because I don't know who's watching us today, who will see this talk in the future, but I feel if we are aware that this is something that makes Thai cacao special, and it's something we want to maintain and keep, then it's something that farmers keep at the top of their head, and all us chocolate makers that go and see farms, that's something we should ask for, we should demand. I'm hoping that we not, as cacao, because right now, as we said many times, Thai cacao is very expensive in comparison to international cacao. I hope we're not getting into a situation where people or farmers in Thailand feel like, oh wow, this is actually a very valuable crop, and I'm just gonna do massive plantations of that. But I feel the current way of growing is extremely special and makes it one of the most sustainable cacaos in the world, and we should be proud of that and maintain that.
Okay, wow, that's very nice. I think maybe we have few audience here, but there's some greeting from Kate Bam. Sawadika. Yeah, Sawadika. This is David Wilson. I think he is a cacao farmers in Thailand. One of them, I remember his name. One of the biggest problem I have also found here in Thailand is the lack of regulation in quality of tree sellers. As a small grower of only 500 trees, I often wonder where is the support. Okay, so we have discussed this issue yesterday, and I think tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Okay, we will talk a lot on this topic, especially, but it is in Thai. If you can do the video backward and then translate by your friends, you will get lots of answer from this tomorrow session. Here, I think the consumer may understand and support us if we point out on the cacao beans from Thailand have no child labor, which will affect the price higher than the commercial trade price. Yeah, thanks. Very good suggestion. This is your FC, Daniel. Pammy. Hello, Daniel. Maybe you know her. And this is from Nacha. Yes, multi-cropping. Yeah, we believe on that. And maybe blah blah. Yeah, support the qualities of Thai. And she said thank you for she loved both of the brands. Okay, thank you so much. So we have 5 minutes left. So please give us the last summarization on the Thai, especially focus on Thai cacao. We will focus on sustainabilities of the Thai cacao. Okay, who want to go first, please? Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I think, for me, I see that for Thailand to have a sustainable cacao industry, we shouldn't be cutting down forests or plantations to plant cacao. We should be planting it underneath tree cover so that it requires less water. It's going to be healthier. Do best practices. I think with additional training and support and feedback from producers to growers, we can sorry, 1 second. So we can help farmers to develop a product that has got a premium quality and consistent, so that we as consumers know that, we as purchasers know that we're going to get a good product, and help farmers to develop products that will be good for other chocolate makers. And I think being better at communicating our values and the benefits of sustainable cacao to consumers and sustainable chocolate to consumers, and how we address all of the many issues that are present in a lot of the chocolate industry. By doing that together as a chocolate, as producers, as a chocolate community, we can encourage consumers to purchase better chocolates that are better for people and better for the planet. So and I'm excited to see how the cacao industry continues to develop in the coming years, and hopefully it'll become a great example to the world of how sustainable cacao can be produced and manufactured and consumed.
Okay, wow, that's very touch. Thank you, Niels. Okay, Daniel.
I just want to maybe finish with a vision. I have this vision, and maybe I put it out there quickly because I feel it's something that maybe will open people's eyes and give them a new idea of how to think about chocolate. Right now, chocolate is a business dominated by 2, maybe a few more companies. Imagine the chocolate world, what the wine world is today. Imagine we go into a direction with chocolate where it's not just a lot of small producers, but where we really go to single estate chocolates, where you travel to a chocolate region, right? Right now we associate chocolate with Switzerland, Germany, right? That sort of chocolate. But imagine a world where we think of chocolate and we think of going on a trip to Indonesia and visiting an area that we know for its beans, and visiting the small estates there that all make their small chocolate. And they all might have similar terrain, but they all have different practices, and we go buy their products and taste that. I feel the potential in chocolate is there. It's equally as complex as wine, it's definitely as much liked as wine, maybe more so because kids eat it too, right? So the consumer base is much bigger than it is for alcoholic products, and it's liked all over the world. So I feel right now, a lot of the time, people we talk to feel like Thailand is late to the game, sort of, or they only wake up now. Indonesia has been already making chocolate for a long time, and they dominate from Southeast Asia. And we're sort of a bit late to waking up to cacao. But I feel if we think about it the other way around, and we think about, okay, what could the chocolate world be in 50 years, and what could it look like? And we think of these single estate chocolates. So we think of a very different model of how chocolate works. We could be the first to the game. We could be sort of the country that develops a model that then other countries will start to copy because it is more sustainable and it makes more sense all the way down the supply chain.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I will go and pack my suitcase right now. I'm waiting to see that pictures, and yeah, this is more sustainabilities, right? If we go to the single place, single estate, and then we visit, and then we can buy the chocolate from the place they can grow cacao. So this is more sustainabilities. Not just only we buy the cacao beans or buy the chocolate, we could also support the travel, also support the culture, the society, so they can bring much more. The chocolate is more connection between everywhere that grow cacao. So thank you so much. I think this session is wonderful. And we all guarantee that the problem that we raise here about the problems of the cacao in the world, the chocolate world, that the child labor, the intense labor, whatever, there is no such thing in Thailand. This is a very special place that we grow cacao, and especially for the chocolate makers, we can go directly to the farm. They can talk, they can visit the farm, they can develop, we can do lots of things developing. This is more sustainabilities. So thank you so much for your time, for your sharing today. I hope we have more big audience session to talk about this in the future. Thank you so much, Neil and Daniel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. That was great. Thanks.
Thank you. สวัสดีครับ
See ya.
โอ้โหเซกชันเมื่อกี้นะครับก็เซกชันนี้เป็นเซกชันที่เราพูดเจาะลึกถึงปัญหานะครับของโลกของช็อกโกแลตนะครับที่เวลาเราพูดถึงเกี่ยวกับโกโก้เกี่ยวกับโลกของช็อกโกแลตแล้วเนี่ยปัญหาพวกนี้เป็นปัญหาที่คนฝรั่งนะคนยุโรปคนอเมริกาคิดถึงเสมอเรื่องความเหลื่อมล้ำความยากจนการใช้แรงงานเด็กการใช้ทาสนะครับการทำลายป่าซึ่งบอกจริงๆครับเรื่องพวกนี้ยังไม่เกิดในประเทศไทยนะครับและเราจะไม่ทำให้เกิดในประเทศไทยและผมขอร้องว่าอย่าให้เกิดในประเทศไทยที่ประเทศไทยเป็นประเทศที่มีความพิเศษในการปลูกโกโก้เนาะแล้วก็คนของประเทศไทยเกษตรกรของประเทศไทยผมเชื่อมั่นนะครับว่าเราจะไม่ทำแบบนั้นเราจะไม่เดินตามรอยอย่างนั้นเราจะไม่เข้าบุกป่าถางป่าแล้วไปปลูกโกโก้ทำลายป่าทำลายสิ่งแวดล้อมเนาะเรามีกฎหมายที่แข็งแรงเรามีชุมชนที่แข็งแรงเราจะรักษานะครับเขาเรียกว่าอะไรculture วัฒนธรรมของโกโก้เนี่ยเพื่อจะพูดเรื่องพวกนี้บอกเรื่องพวกนี้ให้กับคนทั้งโลกได้รู้ว่าช็อกโกแลตที่โกโก้ที่ปลูกที่เมืองไทยช็อกโกแลตที่ทำที่เมืองไทยเนี่ยไร้สิ่งพวกนี้แล้วถ้าเราพร้อมใจกันทำเรื่องพวกนี้นะครับเราไม่จำเป็นต้องไปเซอร์ติฟายพวกเซอร์ติฟายต่างๆเลยเรามาช่วยกันสร้างประเทศไทยเนี่ยให้ทุกคนเข้าใจนะครับด้วยภาพที่แท้จริงด้วยการมาเที่ยวนะครับเดี๋ยวหลังโควิดทุกคนอยากจะมาเที่ยวเมืองไทยพาเข้าไปเที่ยวฟาร์มโกโก้ให้เขาเห็นว่าสิ่งเหล่านี้มันเป็นความเป็นจริงในประเทศไทยไม่ต้องให้ใครมาเซอร์ติฟายเราไม่ต้องเสียตังค์ไปเซอร์ติฟายให้กับฝรั่งเนาะเราสร้างเรื่องนี้ให้ปรากฏขึ้นจริงและเป็นที่ยอมรับของคนทั่วโลกแต่เราต้องช่วยกันเราทุกคนคนไทยต้องเป็นกระบอกเสียงบอกเรื่องนี้ออกไป บอกเรื่องนี้ออกไปแล้วเราต้องทำคุณภาพนะครับอย่างที่นิวส์บอกสุดท้ายแล้วอยู่ที่คุณภาพเราจะขายโกโก้ที่แพงกว่าท้องตลาด4 เท่า 5 เท่าเราขายได้ถ้าเรามีคุณภาพจริงๆนะครับในเซสชันถัดๆไปเราจะมาพูดถึงนะครับเซสชันต่อจากนี้คือรอบ 4 โมงเนาะก็จะเป็นเรื่องราวของ Beyond Chocolate มากกว่าช็อกโกแลตมันคืออะไรน่าสนใจมากครับเซสชันนี้น้องเมย์ก็เตรียมตัวอยู่แล้วนะครับแล้วก็รอบเย็นนี้ช่วง 6 โมงเย็นนะครับจะเป็นเรื่องราวของช็อกโกแลตเมเกอร์ไม่ควรพลาดนะครับเพราะว่าผมได้เชิญคนที่ทำเกี่ยวกับเครื่องจักรช็อกโกแลตตั้งแต่สเกลเล็กๆเลยนะครับตั้งแต่สเกลแบบว่าทำในครัวทำในบ้านตัวเองนะครับเครื่องจักรเล็กๆจนกระทั่งสเกลขยายใหญ่เรียกว่าเป็นกึ่งระดับอุตสาหกรรมได้เลยนะครับเขาจะมาพูดมาให้ข้อมูลเกี่ยวกับเครื่องจักรทำช็อกโกแลตกันเราจะได้มีความรู้นะครับทั้งครบเลยนะครับแล้วอย่าลืมตอน 20:00 นมาเจอการตอบคำถามกันนะครับวันนี้ยังมีรางวัลแจกอีกมากมายนะครับขอบคุณนะครับที่ติดตามหัวข้อนี้ถึงแม้เป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะแต่ผมว่าดูว่าวิวไม่ลดเลยนะครับขอบคุณมากที่อยู่เป็นเพื่อนกันนะครับแล้วก็พบกันในหัวข้อดีๆถัดไปนะครับขอบคุณครับสวัสดีครับ